Hello and welcome to episode 2 of Survivor Character Study. My name's Tristan Fluhr. That's Tyler Klimes. And we're going to talk about the guy who was the inventor of the Secret Alliance, the winner of Survivor 48, Mr. Kyle Fraser.
Yeah, I don't
How
know.
are you?
Is he the sole inventor of the Secret Alliance? I hear
Oh,
there's
no, he's a co-inventor. We'll talk about the
right.
other inventor of the Secret Alliance strategy a little later in this podcast, but Kyle was the winner of Survivor 48 and the person that probably gets some of the most credit for that, right?
Yeah, it has to because of the way it all goes down. But it is a dynamic duo that is secretive to everyone on the island, but not to a single audience member at home. I
Hmm.
think we heard about it
Not to
every
the edit.
yeah. It
Not to
was
the edit.
three times an episode, but it is important and is a really like getting past the jokes. It's a dynamic relationship that you don't see often in
Hmm.
Survivor.
Best average guy,
Yeah.
as he says. All right. So let's talk about who we are. In case you missed our first episode, we're producers and storytellers that love Survivor and the characters that make the show great. We're not pretending to be experts, right? We're both in our 20s, but we're trying to create great discourse around why characters are great, why this show is as great as it is, and we think that a huge reason is about characters. We're trying to create great conversations about those and have that spill into the Survivor community at large. Tyler, any thoughts to add?
Yeah, we're not experts like you said, but we are passionate people about not only reality TV and Survivor, but storytelling and
Mhm.
who characters are. So we'll try and give you our insight, even though it's not expert analysis. I think that's what kind of helps us relate to our audiences more, as do characters, is that we're kind of just people talking about Survivor in a fun way, just kind of going on some inside knowledge that we know, but just talking and having a good time, talking about something we're passionate and love.
We're trying to be an easy listening Summer of Survivor podcast that you can listen to while you're waiting for Survivor 51 and reliving the great Survivor 50. Another part of this podcast is to answer the question, what makes a character great on Survivor? And here's a guy who is a great character. And I don't know about you, but I fell even more in love with Kyle on season 50, even though he was only there just a couple of days.
Which you wouldn't really expect. Coming into
Yeah.
50, Kyle was not that I didn't like him, but he just wasn't because I really enjoyed Kyle on his first season. But after just coming off a win and then immediately coming back after all of America and beyond has seen it, it didn't feel like the most interesting story and felt like he was a player that was set up to fail.
Well,
And
and
certainly
especially
he's
since
not.
season 48 wasn't the most critically acclaimed season
Yeah,
of all time,
yeah.
right? And I have a theory about Survivor 48, but we'll talk about that a little later. Um, but as you were saying,
Yeah, I think he was just in a lot of ways set up to fail on 50 and still found a way, at least socially, not physically, to make it
mhm,
far into the game and to build relationships and to kind of defy those odds. And I think that's where his story starts in 48 as well, if we want to just dive right into the
let's go
beginning of
for it.
48. Yeah. So I guess I'll kind of throw it at you, Tristan. What do you think? Coming into the premiere of 48, you have Kyle who describes himself as a very average man, the best average guy. He can kind of do
Hmm.
it all. He comes in to the game with confidence, but also knowing who he is. He's a big guy. He's played sports and done all that, but gets into a challenge early on where they need to fill up the what do you call those
The
bowls?
water jugs,
Yeah,
yeah.
the glass water jugs, and ends up shattering it early on.
I actually
Um,
forgot that happened until we
yeah,
revisited 48 just a couple of days ago, to be honest with you. That is so long ago in my mind. I remember that was a battle between our two winner picks. I
yeah.
had Kevin as the winner pick of Survivor 48. You had Kyle, and we see where that leads,
Kyle
obviously.
was my second. I
Oh,
was
that's right.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
We don't need to talk about my actual winner pick, but
Oh, yes. Luigi's Pizza.
yes,
Justin. Piappi.
yes. But Kyle, I was in between Kyle and Justin. I chose
Hmm.
Sean. But yeah, you have that moment. So I guess I want to ask you first off, you get thrown into the 48 early on, especially in hindsight, knowing he's going to win the season. that character moment, what stands out to you about it? What makes that important to you?
Well, I think what stands out is the fact that not only does he really start the game off on a rough note, right? That's a rough way to start. Um, but he really makes the best of it by helping Kevin. You never know if Kevin makes it further in the game. That could be a relationship that helps him out. Obviously, he didn't need it because he won the season. But also, he goes back to his tribe and integrates himself really well. The only person that really holds that against him was Charity. And that's because she thought he got an advantage. It's literally the only reason Charity holds that against Kyle. And I think that's super interesting. And when you learn more about Kyle's story, he's this guy that is just this really beloved guy. He's an attorney, he's a defense attorney, he works for people in rough situations as he was at one point in his life, in and out of prison. I think that's something that's super interesting about Kyle's story, and I think that's kind of not just the character, the guy that we see that's the lovable character, but it's also the backstory that helps him show up the way he is. And I think that's what helped him create so many great bonds, especially with people in his original tribe, and then going to the merged tribe with Joe and Eva and Shaheen and so on and so forth.
Yeah, his past, much like the glass in that first challenge that he does, is it's a bit shattered, it's a bit
Mm,
broken, but he's able to bounce back due to his social ability, his tenacity, his grit to get back in and to just be a nice person and to find himself back up literally on top by the time the season's over.
yeah, and I think, some moves that stand out from Kyle in 48, right? The California Girls Blindside, plan
Hmm.
concocted by him and Camilla, somehow staying under the radar. Apparently, Ozzy and Sari were paying attention on how to become an alliance without anybody knowing because they
Yeah.
they seem to be doing it on season 50, but um, that move was great. It was a move that where they took out Thomas in a way that it looked like certainly Kyle was going. Kyle plays his idol. Somehow Shaheen doesn't find it in his bag. Camilla dupes them, and Kyle pulls the punch when needed. And they use the extra vote to success with the idol. And that's the perfect way of going through it for Kyle and Camilla. And I think that was the first move of 48 that we really saw that we were like, okay, this guy can play.
Yeah. It takes some luck for his advantage, his idol not to be found.
For sure.
That round, but it's about what you're able to do with that. And
Mhm.
Kyle responds to that well. He hides his relationship as much as it gets talked about as a joke now. He hides his relationship with Camilla very well, especially in that round where they're not even suspecting that they're talking to each other. They think they're both just going to throw each other under the bus, to use one of Camilla's terms. And that's just not the case at all. So he he's kind of like the mastermind behind the scenes throughout the whole season, but this is where it really starts of making the moves but not being seen, not being put into that spotlight and just staying in the background while also manipulating things that he needs to in order to further his game.
Yeah, and also talking about Kyle from 48, you talked about the Shaheen boot where him and Camilla are really driving the bus on that. Taking Joe to final three, I think, the edit makes you think that Joe is the final boss of this game. He is the person that Kyle's gonna have to get over. And I think a lot of us, when we saw him taking Joe to the end, we're kind of like, hey, dude, what are you doing? Um, we were getting woo flashbacks, but um, turns out it wasn't a bummer, and turns out that Kyle had the correct read of the situation, and also had somebody sitting up on the jury that was going to go to bat for him, and we've seen how much an alliance partner on the jury can be a huge advantage or disadvantage depending on how you treat them and how they go out of the game.
Yeah, I think that comes back to Thomas too, is the
Mm,
way that 48 is portrayed is Thomas is a huge character in the pre-merge.
yeah,
Like I remember being shocked that he was gone
me
so
too.
early on in the season. Not only because he was a great character, but because they were showing how great of a character he was, how strategic he was, and yet Kyle and Camilla were still able to maneuver around that and make a move against him and the California girls. And you get that same edit with Joe. Now in 50, people think about Joe a little bit differently than they do in 48. But in 48, Joe, like it or not, was a strategic force because the strategy on 48 is so different than it is on a lot of these new
Yeah.
era seasons. And again, Kyle probably that's not the style of game he wants to play. He likes to stay under the radar, yes, but he wants to make moves and play Survivor in a deceptive way where he can lie and he can do all these things. And he has to blend in. He has to allow himself to just to look like everyone else, even though he wants to play in a different world. And he's so good at adapting in that way. And I think that's what makes him stand out and ultimately what makes him the winner of the season.
Well, and we'll talk about Joe later, but I think 48 is really an interesting season to break down from a strictly story perspective.
Mhm.
And a theory I have about 48 is because the storytelling is a little different than any other season. I think the reason for that is they know that they're going to get a ton of eyeballs on it because of the Joe and Eva scene. They hyped that up as one of the biggest moments in recent Survivor history. That season had a lot of eyeballs on it. I think they were going more for the casual audience that season. And I think so much of their edit was reminding people what had happened in episode to episode. So if this was your first time watching it, you would immediately be able to pick up the story with Kyle and Camilla, right? I think that was why it was probably shown so much. I wonder if that was more the casual get you to hook you into Survivor season. I almost wonder if that's kind of where that comes from.
And where do you think Kyle falls into that? He doesn't maybe doesn't get as much screen time or as much hype as Joe does, but where do you think he lies in that season
Well, I think,
through the
he kind of
storyline?
says it, the best average guy. I think you can feel good about Kyle winning, right? He's somebody that's a really likable guy. He's somebody who it's easy to root for him. He's not somebody that you're gonna have to try to prop up really hard for you to be like, okay, that's the winner, right? Like he talks for a little bit and you see him do a move or two and you're like, okay, yeah, this guy got it. And I think Kyle's really a master of subtlety. And I think that's something he brings into season 50 as well.
And he's really aware as well.
Yeah,
Going back to
really
the
self-aware.
move, yes, going back to the Shaheen move, which really ends up being obviously a move on Shaheen, but it's just as much as a move on Joe. It's the
Hmm.
winning point of the season
It's the
because
pants down move for sure.
yeah, exactly. Joe refers to him as getting wedgied on national TV later on, and that's what it is. It's Kyle taking out Joe not by getting his torch enough, but by taking his credibility away in the game in a lot of ways because he's played a move on Joe that Joe has no clue about. And I think that's a really fun idea. And I think something that needs to be explored as we get into future seasons even more is that you can go to the end with power players. It's
Hmm.
okay to do that because as long as you're making moves against what people could think of power players of the season that aren't there. And if you can come into Final Tribal and have something that can be verified by people on the jury as well. Luckily, he has Camilla to verify all this with him and make a move against a Goliath type player and be a David and shoot that slingshot straight at him in Final Tribal is really all you need to do.
Well, and I think you look at season 48 Final Tribal Council, and it's a lot of narrative warfare between Kyle and Eva.
Yep.
Eva saying, I want to be the representative from our season, who has a really strong final tribal and gets 2 votes, something that I don't think a lot of people were expecting. Joe only getting 1 vote, I definitely don't think people were expecting. And
Yeah.
I think, with Kyle, somebody who really kind of played this oh shucks guy, kind of attitude, but owned his game when he needed to, in the right ways. And I think he kind of used the narrative well. He kind of let Eva spin her narrative and then had the upper hand with him. And I think the people that are able to spin narratives well are best at Final Tribal Council. You look at Marianne, spins the perfect narrative in one of the best Final Tribal Councils ever. Even outside the new era, you look back to Todd Herzog, one of the best Final Tribal Council performances ever. Spins narratives about Jean Robert. Does he think Jean Robert is a great Survivor player? Absolutely not. Does he spin that narrative and get his vote? Absolutely, he does.
Yeah. And that's something about who Todd is as well in that season and just in life too, is someone who was aware of who the players around him are, what they needed to hear, what he needed to do to gain their respect. And for
Yep.
Kyle, like we said, that's undermining and making moves in the background but having the ability to articulate in a way that makes sense and is clear to those to that are on the jury that this is true. Because I want to hit on this a bit more and
Yeah.
ask you just about this moving forward in the future. It is so difficult to do. To
Oh
come
yeah.
into Final Couple and say, here's what I did, and none of you knew about it. Because you're sitting on the jury and you're like, well, I'm just hearing about this five
Yeah.
minutes ago. What do you expect me to like? How can I verify this? How can this be true? But Kyle puts the pieces in place because Camilla's on that jury as well, being a huge help to have everything together where they can go, wow, this is true. And we didn't know about this, and that's even crazier and even better because we still didn't know about this all the way up until day 26 of this game. That's so difficult to do. I want to ask, how do you think Kyle does it in this way, and how can we see that moving forward?
Well, I think Kyle's a chameleon.
Yeah,
I think he very is very good at camouflaging himself for who he's with. He can really fit into that strong, tough guy integrity alliance, right? And then you see in season 50, he camouflages himself to Steph and Colby with kind of that same pitch. And he also camouflages himself to Genevieve and Q and says, "Hey, you saw what I did with Camilla. We can still play that chaotic game." I think Kyle, like I said, is a really good master of subtlety and is somebody who really knows how to play the margins and knows how to do the little things really well. And I think that allows him to come off as not salesman-y,
yeah,
specifically when he's really trying to play both sides. It's like you don't see him as that Jekyll and Hyde, right? You see him as just Kyle, who's there, who can really turn himself into whoever you want him to be.
yeah. He almost he has the exterior like that hard shell that could fit in with some of the bigger players on the season who want to, be out there in challenges. Like that hard as gold type uh
Hmm.
exterior, but also has a heart of gold, right?
Yeah.
Like internally he's someone who can perform well physically, can do all the things on that side, but also go back and play just as well in the social aspect of the game.
Well, and upon that, he's earnest and genuine, and I think if there's any flaw in him, I don't think he sticks up for himself sometimes. Like, he kind of needed Camilla's push in that final tribal council. If he gets that, if he doesn't get that from Camilla, who knows, right? That was kind of like the D Wade LeBron alley-oop meme, like that's
Yeah.
kind of what that felt like, setting him up for the slam of the question, right? Um, and I think that maybe that's a flaw for Kyle, but honestly, I think the only flaw for him going into 50 was the fact that he was a winner. He addressed this in his season 50 press. He said, "We have 24 people. I think over half of them sat at the end. I'm out there on the island and I'm saying, listen, a juror has something different for lunch. We might have three more winners out here." I think he felt and he tried to spin the best narrative he could, right? But it's hard when you have that $1 million check or he's been talking about the taxes, the $700,000 check, right? That's it's just a little different.
Yeah, and again, it's like that's even harder to become the chameleon in 50 because like you have that check attached to you,
Yeah.
not physically, but like, people look at Kyle and say, "Oh, he's already done this. We're not gonna let him like I don't want to build a relationship with him. He's an easy out in this game because he just won. Like, what are we doing, guys?" But then to still like kind of tuck that check into his back pocket metaphorically, or even let's take it back to the Thomas boot to stuff that check like the idol in his bag and it's not
Hmm.
found. Like
Yeah.
it's there the whole time, but you just can't find it. You don't see it because there's so many other things that he puts out there and distracts you with and can entice you with. That is because it's genuine. It's because
Well,
that's who Kyle is.
and Kyle was my first boot pick for season 50.
I
I
didn't know that.
thought the target on him was going to be just so big and he was super well insulated moving to 50. He gets locked in an alliance basically right off the rip with Genevieve, Colby, Steph, Q. They kind of pull in Rizzo. And obviously, that becomes more of a thing once Kyle's voted out. But he was poised to make another great run, and I don't think that's something that anyone expected. And I think honestly, maybe him being medevac when he was great for his aura and legacy, right? I mean, he's probably going to come back a third time. He has this great reputation. You're like, man, he could have done something again. I think he's moved up in the rank of winners in a lot of people's mind. So far, great PR move from Kyle.
Hmm. Yeah, he's. I looked back at my boot order too of 50, my predictions, and I was the same way. Kyle in 24th place, and ultimately he doesn't fall far from that, but it's not because of his gameplay. It's because of the injury
Yeah.
that comes upon him.
Well, and if Kyle doesn't get hurt, maybe he falls into the Colby thing where he is an advantage getting target. You never know, or a blood moon, whatever. Bad twist for bad twist, right?
Yeah.
One of those targets. Um, Something I do want to ask you about. Why do you think Kyle's attractive to old school players? You
Why
know,
you said?
because most players in the old school in Survivor 50 preseason press wanted to work with Kyle. You look at Joe, you look at Eva, you look at so many of these people from season 48, David, want to work with Kyle. What makes Kyle so attractive to some of these older players?
He's just warm.
Yeah,
I think that's what it comes down to is you can talk to someone and just feel that they're being genuine and feel that they are a kind person that wants to get to know them as well, who is really invested in listening. And in his job, all the time, he has to be paying attention and
yeah,
listening and thinking of responses. And that's not just to say he does that in his job, because he probably does that in real life too. Neither of us has met Kyle, but that really comes through the screen. And the old school type of players like that, and they can appreciate that and want to connect in that way. Because when you get to Survivor and you're on that island, you don't really have anything else to do but to talk and to get to know each other and to try and play the game together. And Kyle opens himself up for business in that way to say, I want to get to know you first, and then
yeah.
let's play together.
Well, and let's talk about Kyle's demise in season 50. Second immunity challenge. Uh, Kyle goes up the wall, tears his Achilles tendon. Um, he had actually already gone up the wall and had to go back down to help Colby out, which is something they didn't show in the edit. That's we know that from postseason press and exit interviews and stuff, but really devastating for Kyle. You see the hurt on his face. He really tried to walk that off, and that's not an injury you walk off, right?
No,
At
not at
least for
all.
most people. We're sports people. Like we've seen these injuries not just on TV, but in real life, and these are scary injuries. They are.
Yeah, that's again the appeal of who Kyle is as a player, is how tough he is. Like as soon as I heard Achilles in the premiere episode, I was like, okay, if it's torn, he's done. Like
Yeah,
we've
he's
seen
out.
it
Yeah.
times in the NFL and through other things. That's
Hey,
like
I'm an Indiana Pacers
you
fan. You don't
you
have to
know,
talk to me about torn Achilles.
yeah,
Tyrese
yeah,
Halliburton,
that's right.
man, broken heart.
Exactly. Like that's it for a whole year of
Yeah,
people playing, like let alone having limited medical service out there on an
yeah,
island, a situation where you're not going to be given much food and much service. Like he battled through that. And that's a testament to who he is and how tough he is. And also I want to take it back to, I know I kind of already made an analogy with
yeah.
this glass getting a lot of screen time today from the first episode of 48. But in that first episode, the glass shatters, like we mentioned, and then you get to see Kyle's social game come from that, from helping other people out.
Mm-hmm.
In 50, it's the inverse. We don't see it on the
Mm-hmm.
season, but we know behind the scenes that he goes back down socially because he's such a nice guy, and maybe for the game purpose as well, to go and help Colby to come down and to help him. And ultimately, his game is shattered because of that. So you get to see really both sides of the coin. Not a Beast reference there, but like that's who he is. Ultimately, what leads him to success in 48 is what quite literally provides a downfall for him in 50.
Look at that. You're ready for tribal council with Jeff. You got
Like,
the analogies ready to go.
wait till I hit my shin on the coffee table and then start talking about it like Steven from 49.
Is this a space reference or a kangaroo metaphor?
Yes,
Okay.
exactly. Yeah. Steven
Anyway,
was on a podcast, just to tangent real quickly. He was on a podcast the other day and he was talking about his analogies and how he's like, oh, why did I say that? And I found it funny, which is,
yeah.
I don't think Kyle was really much of an analogy giver on his season.
No, no. Well,
If he,
that season wasn't big on analogies. And if it
oh,
was from anyone, it was from Shaheen.
yeah,
But
yeah, yeah,
not big. That season's really kind of a weird one in terms of the greater lexicon of Survivor. And I don't think you're gonna hear too many people saying I love 48 in the comment section. But uh,
no,
if you do, let us know. We'd like to see you. I don't know how many of those exist, but man, that'd be fun
yeah.
to hear a little bit.
I think a big reason why Kyle and Camilla are on 50 is because they are different than what the 48 mold was. Obviously,
True.
Joe gets on as well, but they are opposite of that in a way. What about that do you think appealed to the producers of Survivor to want to continue to tell their story?
Well, I think first of all, their destinies are tied together. And I think so many of these people on this cast of season 50, their destinies are tied, right? You talk about Sari and Ozzy, tied destinies in certain ways. Mike White, Christian, Angelina, all their destinies are kind of tied together. Not just because they're on the same season, but because there are storylines there. Ozzy and Coach, you see that play off in the very first episode. Kyle and Camilla were, you know, we joke about it, a secret alliance, right? Their destinies are tied. And what happens when you split them up? What happens if they could possibly be on the same beach again? That's interesting story. And I think that that also comes from it. I also think the producers probably wanted to see what Camilla would do when Camilla has said, I would like to be on a different season, with a different cast and see what I could do. And this was a gameplay that was very Camilla coded in a lot of ways. And didn't work out for her. We'll talk about that, in Camilla's episode. But I think that with Kyle, he's somebody who obviously they're trying to build up as one of the fan favorite characters. And, I think there's a lot of JT to him to a certain extent, going back to some of the older characters like that we really love, like a Tom Westman type, somebody who just comes off as really genuine and warm and somebody who makes big moves and somebody who is really good at the subtlety too.
Yeah, Tom Westman's not one I really thought of, but I see a comparison in a way. Obviously, Tom kind of relied a bit more on his physical game, in
Yeah,
Palau
for sure.
especially.
He also
But
didn't have Joe
yeah,
and David out there,
yeah,
in fairness.
yeah, 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 very true.
Yeah, and I think that there's a lot of these. Kyle's a very throwback player in a lot of ways. Um, he's somebody that you would see in maybe the mid early 30s, late 20s, maybe in terms of the way they cast him. I think he's not quite the super nerdy fan that you would see in the new era, right? And I think that that's something that's really interesting about his character. I think his backstory also with him having a checkered past, really is an interesting thing coming with him. And I think that's always a great thing in terms of complex characters, like we've said before. I think those are the best characters. Um, you
Yeah,
know, I've said before that I think Joe could win a season in the teens or 20s, or in the first 10 seasons of the game. I think Kyle's a pretty evergreen character. You could stick him into basically any season. I think he'd do pretty well.
yeah. I was just gonna hit that as well. Like he has the life experience, and that leads him to success to fit in with all the crowds because he's had to do that in life,
Yeah.
and it makes it a lot easier to do that in a manufactured environment in Survivor.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about his fight to stay in the game.
Yeah.
Obviously that injury, devastating, brutal, right? He's still recovering from it as we speak now. And there's a real fight for him to stay in the game. He's talking about, hey, I'm a lawyer. I know the risks that are associated with it. He's fighting to stay in the game with Dr. Joe. And I think that that's one of the things that makes him so likable. And we've
Mhm.
talked we can talk about what makes Kyle so likable, but I think this whole podcast is basically that thesis statement, right? Um, but what makes him a great character, other than just the likability, right? You see the fight, you see the well-roundedness of Kyle, but what makes him a great character? What makes him something that people generally have a really high opinion about?
I think really that's it. Like that is the key to it is we talked about this in our first episode with Jenna as well, but
Hmm.
like Kyle is someone that you could find somewhere. Like that you could just be walking on the street and see a Kyle and introduce yourself. And in real life, like Kyle's probably someone that you could see and he would treat you like anyone
Yeah.
else because Kyle really is just a like all right, let's try this one out for a try here. You hear the term mid thrown a lot around a
Mm,
lot, right? Like, and that's looked at as a bad thing. Oh, this is mid. Like, this is like, oh, just okay. It's not good
yeah.
enough. But like, Kyle describes himself as mid. He doesn't say that because he's like not brain rotty, but you know what I mean. Like,
Hey, Rizzo
uh,
would.
yeah, Rizzo will throw that around. But like being in the middle in this essence is what leads to his success as a character
Yeah.
and what leads to him being a good character. Because so many times you see extremes, especially on TV. You're gonna see the extremely loudmouth person. You're gonna
Yeah.
see the shy person who learns to grow into their own skin. But Kyle's right in the middle of that spectrum, and you just get to see him play that middle throughout the whole game. And it's he was at the bottom and at the top at points
Yeah.
in his life, which leads him to the middle.
So that makes me wonder why he got cast. Because I think so
Yeah.
many of these people get cast because they're gregarious or because um, they ride the line between normal and crazy. And I think I wonder what the producers saw in Kyle to cast him. I'm happy they did, right? Great casting, but I wonder, what was it?
I think they probably saw what we end up seeing on 48, but really 50 is like
Hmm.
that he's going to fight and to be tough. And he loves this game and cares about this game and can play with anyone. Like, and I think you need those types of people on all seasons. Like you're gonna get your big characters, but you also need people that can do it all and that you run a simulation of any season and they're gonna be pretty successful. And that's probably pretty a good thing for casting to want to go because they can just rely on someone to be good throughout.
Yeah. So I have a two-part question here. Will we see Kyle again? Part one. Part two, is he the most likely future two-time winner from the new era?
Whew. Um, I remember when he got medically evacuated that it was pretty commonality that we would see him again. And I agree with that. I think ultimately this may be the only way that we see Kyle a third
I
time
agree. Yeah.
because now he has like he went from the top of the totem pole to the bottom of the totem pole, just getting to see all sides of it. And again, now we find him right in where he started, right in the middle. And it was engaging the first time, and I think we could do that once again. And people want to see Kyle and realize he had more game to bring and more to provide on 50. And I think there's a good shot we do see him again. But other than if he went on a run in 50, which did seem possible based on the beginnings of the season, I think this could be a long case, maybe a better long case scenario for him if he wanted to play a third time.
It's almost like a Tina Wesson situation where she
Yeah.
gets voted out early in All Stars, and I think a lot of people were like, well, what could Tina do? Again. And
Yeah.
you see her in Blood versus Water, and she's one immunity challenge away from winning the game.
Yeah.
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 But do we think Kyle's the most likely two-time winner that
Oh
could
yeah.
be from the new era? I think D's probably maybe the first person you think of, and I think it's between D or Kyle. But I think Kyle's ability to be disarmingly nice and genuine, I think puts him a little above D in my opinion. I think D just comes off as naturally really threatening, but we also saw in Survivor 50 that she's really great at building those relationships and bonds.
Yeah. Look back at the rest of the new era though. Like
Hmm.
Marianne is similar to Kyle in that aspect as well.
Yeah.
Kenzie's similar to Kyle in that aspect as
I don't
well.
think Kenzie's coming back though. That's the only
Yeah.
thing there.
Rachel is the same way. There's others in the new era and beyond. Like that a lot of the times is the type of players that are winning seasons.
True.
So because of that, I think a lot of those characters could have good shots to win if they came back because they played, you know, I don't want to say middle of the road games, but like games that were good enough to win and did what they knew that they
Yeah.
had to do and didn't like come out and make flashy plays.
All right. Hero, villain, anti-hero. We ask this every podcast about every character we talk about. Hero, villain, anti-hero. What do you think Kyle is? I think this one's pretty easy.
Yeah.
Strictly in the hero column for Kyle.
Why do you think that?
Well, I mean, it's everything like we've said, right? He's a genuine guy. He's a guy that you could see anywhere doing anything, right? He has a great backstory. Um, he's a really empathetic character, and he's somebody that people care about, and I didn't expect to see so many people really kind of beat up about Kyle leaving the game. If you can get Survivor Twitter feeling some type of way about you, that's either a really good or a really bad thing. And for Kyle's case, it's a really good thing. So
Yeah.
credit to him.
Yeah, I'm not going to overanalyze on this one. I'm with you for all the reasons you said. So,
Yeah.
no need to.
Well, and I think that's kind of what we will remember about Kyle. I mean, it's easier to do this for a winner, right? Because we have their whole season as their story of why they won the game. But I also think, 50 kind of leave us with that taste of wanting more. And I think that's kind of where you want to be as a character.
Yeah. Yeah, and he's someone who I think always just wants more in life and in Survivor. A big fan of the game. And just I think it seems he's just a person that anyone could get along with. It would be tough to not like Kyle if you met him, and that's what leads to success in life and ultimately in reality television. So
Tyler, any final thoughts?
no, I think something I was thinking of too throughout this entire podcast, and I want to ask you this question. So I
Hmm.
guess there's something. We talked about it a bit, but there's so many characters, and especially after my what I said about like other new era winners who
Hmm.
are also played like under the radar games that were successful. What do you think makes Kyle different from those characters?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Yeah, I struggle like because a lot of those characters are similar and like
I
are
maybe
tough to
it's the
fight.
fact he stands out the most from his season.
Okay.
I think Kyle and Camilla were the most different characters on their season.
Yeah.
I think that Kyle on 48 was very different, right, than every other character. Camilla was definitely different than every other character on 48. As somebody who was more than happy to disrupt the honor and integrity thinking. But I don't know. And I do I mean, I think a lot of it comes down to what makes a great Survivor player, what makes a great Survivor winner, what makes a great Survivor character. And I think so much of what makes Kyle great is his subtlety. And I think that's what makes it hard to explain, is because like there are just little things that Kyle does every couple of minutes that you're like, wow, I really like this guy.
I think that's well said. It's interesting because a lot of characters in the past and in the new era have had to blend in and really like figure that out. But like you said, like what makes Kyle different is he has to blend in even more. I don't know how well this is gonna come up on screen here, but I'm gonna try my best. I have a light here, so let's see if this will work. But you have this here green poker chip, right? Just sitting
Hmm.
next to me while we recorded this. Let's see if I can hold these two up here together. You can see like a slight difference in color in these two,
Yeah.
right? This one's a little bit dark than this one. Yeah, it's tough to come up on screen, but a lot of times like that's where a lot of characters fall. They just need to blend in and become this darker version or this lighter version of themselves. Kyle comes into the season like this, like like very different in a lot of aspects than a lot of people that on the season, and he still ultimately has to look like this. And that's harder to do than to make go this into this, right?
Well, and
And
that's Camilla too, right? And in a lot of
yeah,
ways, it's fitting they kind of found each other as the two people that are probably the most fish out of water on their seasons and on their casts.
yeah, yeah. So
Maybe you add in Say
I mean,
into that conversation too, but
yeah,
it's a conversation
yeah,
for a different time.
for sure.
Yeah. Speaking of that, though, if anyone has any players they want us to talk about, if anyone has any seasons they want us to talk about, drop it in the comment section down below. If you're a big Kyle fan, sound off in the comments, blow us up on social, let us know what you think about Mr. Kyle Fraser, the winner of Survivor 48. If you're not a huge Kyle fan, I don't know if there's really anyone, but if there is, what don't you like about him? We always say that if you really like somebody, you really don't. That's the point. That makes a effective reality TV character. Tyler, any final thoughts before we wrap this episode of Survivor Character Study?
No, I think I got everything out that I was thinking. Just I do hope we see Kyle again. I think there's more story to tell from him, and I think he's a fantastic watch. And maybe isn't the like the funniest or the wittiest confessionals that you'll get,
Hmm.
but that's okay. That is a lot of times what makes the subtle great Survivor characters, which he is.
Yep. Well, that'll do it for us at Survivor Character Study. My name is Tristan Fluhr. That's Tyler Klimes. We appreciate you checking us out. Like, comment, subscribe, follow the podcast if you want to hear more. Again, we're your easy listening Survivor podcast where we're trying to answer the question, what makes great characters? Because characters make Survivor great. So long.